Now for tissue inflammation, potato, the humble potato. Now the potato is very good at reducing tissue inflammation. So this would be something like a swollen infected finger. It would be something like a swollen ankle. And sometimes you might have a swollen knee and you'll think, well, do I do potato or do I do ginger? Well, do one for a few hours, take it off and do another one for a few hours. Your body will tell you what is best, because sometimes you don't know whether it's joint or tissue inflammation. And what you do is you just grate that potato. We've got a tiny little potato, but that's usually all you need, because if you do too much, it becomes too wet, and there's nothing worse than leaking poultices. And the lady of the house will not be happy if there's potato juice on her sheets, because it's not easy to get out. In fact, our laundry lady has asked us, please don't do any more poultices at night in the health retreat, because the sheets were getting a bit stained. But you can certainly do them through the day, as long as you make sure you wrap them up really well. There shouldn't be a problem. So here is the potato poultice. And this would be a good size for a knee, say a sore knee, sprained ankle, like that. And you put it, again, you make the poultice out of it. Now, with the potato, it's very alkalizing, and when you've got inflamed tissue, it's very acid. And potato is high in potassium and phosphorus, and both of those are absorbed by the skin to help with the healing. So you can see again, I've got an area around my poultice, so that when you put it on the skin, like I did with Amelia's poultice, the plastic well covers it. A few stories about the potato poultice. I was at a friend's house here, it must have been 18 months ago, and I was seeing a lady. And when she came in, her little boy came in too. And her little boy was about 7, and he had a sore finger. And I was immediately drawn to his sore finger. His finger was swollen almost twice the size. It was all red with a pussy top. I said, what's happened to the finger? And the lady said, well, the doctor says it's cellulitis. Do you know what cellulitis is? Just inflammation of the cell. That's all cellulitis is. Well, that's obvious, that's inflammation of the cell. I said, what have you been doing? She said he's on his 2nd course of antibiotics, he's on painkillers and sleeping tablets at night. 7. I said, did anything happen to that finger? See, the detective hat has to go on. Did anything happen? Oh, he had a blister, and then he played in the dirt, and the blister broke, and the dirt got on the skin. It's not rocket science, is it? And of course, as soon as the dirt got into the blood, then the body reacts by sending white blood cells, inflaming the area to try and protect the area. I said, aha. I said, do you mind if I try something? She said, please. I said, well, what I'd like to do is get 2 cups. One cup's got hot water, the other cup has got cold water. And in the cold water, there are blocks of ice. It's a hydrotherapy treatment. So I shall write this one up. So what we did 3 minutes in the hot water, and we did 30 seconds in the cold water. And the reason this works is that hot is a stimulant. Because we know if we get into a hot shower or a hot bath when we're cold, it stimulates, doesn't it? It's a stimulant. But probably within about 5 minutes of being in a hot bath, how do we feel now? We feel like falling asleep, don't we? So initially, hot stimulates, and then it slows right down. So I put his finger in the hot water, but I'm only going to put it in for 3 minutes, because by 3 minutes, everything's going to slow down. And then I put it into the cold. What happens when you have a cold shower? Has everyone been trying their cold shower? It's a stimulant, isn't it? But if we were to go and dive in a cold creek in the middle of winter, very quickly we start to slow down. In fact, in about 30 seconds, everything starts to slow down. So can you see what we're doing here? We're using the stimulating time of hot, and by the time, before it can slow down, we whiz over to the cold and wake it up again. And before that has time to cool down, we go back to the hot, wake it up again. Can you see what we're doing here? And you do that 3 times. More than 3 times can exhaust the body because this is dramatically moving the blood. You see, the blood is the life of the flesh, and that finger needs more blood. And that wound, in that wound, the blood had tended to sit and pool. So bringing fresh blood in drives the stagnant blood out, and when the fresh blood comes in, it's got oxygen, it's got nutrients, it's got water, it's got white blood cells, everything that finger needs to heal. Now with the little boy, I had the hot water and I said, put your good finger in and tell me if you're comfortable with that temperature. Can you see? This morning we talked about the will. You've got to work with the will. And if that little boy said, I don't want to do this, I would say, okay. Can you see that? A man convinced against his will be of the same opinion still. But I find children are easily won. I say, do you know that this will really help? Would you like to give it a try? See, you show great respect to children and they show great respect to you. And it's only when I get that nod that then I will do it. Anyway, he agreed. He was sick of this finger. Sick of the pain he was going through. And so he put his good finger on. I said, is that good? He said, yes. I said, put this one in. If it hurts, pull it out. And he pulled it out straight away. I said, just keep putting it in. Just keep putting it in until you can bear it. And then eventually he could bear it. And then we timed 3 minutes. And then back to the cold. And the cold feels quite good because you've been so hot. Now, while his finger's in the cold, I put a bit of boiling water in the hot. And then I say, put your good finger in. Are you happy with that temperature? Can you see? You've got to work with the will. He nodded. After 30 seconds, back in the hot. And he could bear it a little bit hotter this time because his finger's been in the cold. Can you see that? He did it 3 times. And when I'd finished the 3 times, how long did that take? 10 minutes? He had a big smile on his face. I would say by looking at his body language, his pain level had reduced by about easily 50% in 10 minutes. Now that's quicker than any painkiller. Maybe IV morphine might be quicker. Isn't that amazing? Brought incredible relief. In fact, hydrotherapy has been used for centuries. And in the area of pain relief, there is no equal to it. And then I put a grated potato poultice on his, because he had a lot of tissue inflammation around there. And when he left, he just had a smile on his face. The mother said, what'll I do now? I said, well, you can do that every 2 hours if he has discomfort. But I think it was something like 11 o'clock in the morning. I said, maybe do it again about 2 and maybe do it again before he goes to bed. And every time you do it, put a fresh potato poultice on because that potato is going to start drawing out the waste and you want that thrown away. She said that when they got home, the little boy said, can we do that again? Why did the little boy say that? He had experienced it. And the mother, I think we got feedback that the mother, I think it was the next day. Yeah, my friend is here. I think it was the next day, wasn't it? She said that all the stuff came out. So I did another potato poultice at about 2, another potato poultice before bed, and when she took the one off in the morning, all the stuff came out. So naturally, that potato had opened the wound. Never put a knife or a scalpel. No, let the body do it. You see, I used to work as a psychiatric nurse and I worked in the operating theatre. Brutal. Surgery's brutal. This is not brutal. This is very gentle, but it's a very powerful way to operate. Now, if I broke an arm and my bones weren't matched, I'll be very thankful for a surgeon to reset my bone. You know, there may be a time. But, you know, there are 4 doctors that get me to go to their town and give these meetings because they know that if everyone had this knowledge, wouldn't that cut down casualty visits in a powerful way? They're just simple things. Do you know, if you're not getting a response, go to the doctor. But, you know, I never have had to because the body always responds. No need for that little boy to take antibiotics. No need for that little boy to take painkillers or sleeping tablets anymore. Just hot and colds and a grated potato poultice. Isn't that amazing? So simple. The mother said, what will I do with his second course of antibiotics? I said, well, I don't have any authority over your son's medication, but I can tell you what I would do. Now, I don't usually have to say anything else because that is quite obvious. But in 15 minutes, we got more results than he'd had for the time. I'm not against antibiotics. They have saved lives and they will continue. But you know, most people should go through their life never having them. Remember, this is just life-saving that they should be used for. So, the humble potato. I have a couple more stories because it's such the humble potato is a powerful thing. When I was living in the rainforest many years ago, when my children were little, we had a guy living on the property who was a real hippie. He was sickling the grass with a sickle, you know, the old-fashioned sickle, and he was doing it barefoot. What's going to happen next? And it went right into the back of his heel. I heard about it, and then I didn't hear anything for a few days. And one of the guys said, have you seen Chris? He's in his caravan, that's where he lived. The foot's swollen up twice the size and there's this red line coming right up his leg, almost to the groin. And he was lying in bed smoking marijuana, waiting for nature to heal. Nature will heal if you give it the right conditions. I said, bring him up. And I did hot and colds. I couldn't do the hot very hot. And when I put someone's foot in, I usually put my hand there and dip it in and I watch their face. You can tell very clearly by their face if they're handling it. And if they can't handle it, just cool it down a bit because you know that after the first cold dip, they can handle the hot a little bit more. And so I did hot and colds 3 times. That brought his pain levels down again by about 50%. And then I did the biggest grated potato poultice I've ever done over his whole foot. You see, he had an internal wound and it had sealed on the outside. Now that is a perfect environment for tetanus. Do you know it's horses that carry tetanus? And we had horses in the paddock, and tetanus can only get a hold in the body if you've got an internal wound that is healed on the outside and not on the inside. It's got to heal from the inside out. I said, come back in 2 hours. He could limp now. Before he couldn't even walk. He came back in 2 hours. He was limping. I did the hot and colds again. I did the grated potato again. But when I took that poultice off, the wound had opened. And that's what you want. You want that wound to remain open until it heals from the inside out. I think I did it again before he went to bed. And then in the morning, and by the way, every time he came back, the red line's going down, down, down. Now, if that foot didn't go down, and if that red line didn't go down, we would have turned straight to hospital. But it did. It did. And that's why I say, try this. If you're getting results, what's the body saying? Yes. What's the results? The results is reduction in swelling. Results are reduction in pain. So you're looking for the body's response. The next day, the foot was almost back to normal. The red line was almost gone. He said, what'll I do now? I said, just keep an eye on it. You're probably all right now. But if the red line creeps up, we just go back to more. I said, that wound must keep open. Keep an eye on it. So I just let him deal with it. I said, if you need more help, I'm here. I wonder how long he had. Maybe another week. Because he had the perfect environment for tetanus. My little grandson, he trod on a rusty nail. He's 3. Went through the crock, right up into his foot. He'd been playing in dirt all day, so he's covered in dirt. When they brought him to me, my daughter-in-law, he was covered in dirt. What's the first thing you do? bath. It's just basic common sense. I put him in a bath, and that calmed him down too. And then I got a grated potato poultice about this big, wrapped it on the bottom of his foot, bandaged it, put a sock on, and put his little Crocs on. And that's it. Of course, said a prayer over it. That night, my son William, he did another grated potato poultice after his evening bath. William said to me he only did it at night. Through the day there was no swelling, there was no pain, so he left it, and at night he did the potato poultice. After the third night, William came to me and he said, "Mum, look at this poultice." And it was the poultice that he'd had on all night. On top of the poultice, there were little shavings of fluorescent blue metal. The grated potato poultice had pulled the metal out of his foot and cleaned the metal up. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And they didn't do it again. That's it. Did he have a tetanus shot? No, he didn't. There is no need, because his foot was given the conditions required for healing. And those tetanus shots sometimes can be quite nasty. Death by tetanus is not a pretty picture, but most of the times it can be prevented by just immediately working on the wound that is there. One more story of grated potato poultice. My girlfriend Lindy rang me. This is when we all had our babies together, and I could hear her little boy Louis screaming in the background, and I said, "What's the matter with Louis? He's 10 months old." She said, "I don't know, but his little penis is swollen twice the size and he's screaming. You know, sometimes you don't know why. And if you take him to the hospital, what are they going to do?" I said, "Make a grated potato poultice quickly." See, how long did that take me? Not long at all. That's why it's good. Over the next week, make yourself a poultice box. Buy a plastic box, call it poultice box, and get your little squares and your little graters and all your bits and pieces, so if there's a crisis, it's just there. And you'll be very thankful. So she put this on his scrotum, then put his nappy on, and she said he stopped crying in about 5 minutes. You see, whenever you've got swollen, painful tissue, the cool grated potato poultice is very soothing, and that immediately starts to cool the area. Little Louis slept for a couple of hours. She said she kept going in. She wanted to know if he was all right because he was finally sleeping. Poor little chap was probably exhausted too. When he woke up, she quickly changed his nappy and everything was back to normal. Now, sometimes you don't know why. He's a little crawling baby. My girlfriend was a hippie. Maybe he was crawling in the grass. Maybe a grass seed got there. Maybe an ant bit the area. It's hard to know. But no matter what the problem, if ever you see swelling in the tissue, you put the grated potato on. And for joint, you put the ginger poultice on. My son James, he works out, you know, and he was working out too much a few years ago and his whole arm swelled up. So he remembered what Mum used to do, and he put a grated potato poultice over his whole arm and bandaged it up. In the morning it was all back to normal except for the joint there. Looks like that little one will do well with onion on the feet tonight, hey? And we'll give her a dose of this soon. Can you see the syrups forming? The syrup's already forming. Usually within 24 hours it's all done and you strain it. Let's go back to James and his swollen elbow. He went to the doctor and the doctor said, "That's bursitis." What's bursitis? Just inflammation of the bursa, which is the fluid around the joint. He said, "Take this antibiotic." James stood up and said, "I've never taken an antibiotic in my life and I'm not about to start." And he left the surgery. Do you think the doctors ever heard that? He certainly didn't need an antibiotic for that. And you know, there's a big push today to get doctors to stop prescribing so many, because when people really need it, they're not working. So James rang up Mum, and Mum said, "Put the ginger on." So he put the ginger on. He said it got very, very hot, but he put it on one night, reduced down half. Put it on the next night, and by morning it was all the inflammation had gone. Very simple things. and yet powerful. Now, if you don't regularly use ginger, you can freeze ginger just like that. And you can just grate it frozen. So I know that if you have ginger in the fridge and you don't use it, it can mould. So that's a good tip to know, that you can freeze it.